What are tariffs? To put it simply, tariffs are essentially charges that governments impose on commodities that are imported. When a nation imports goods from another country, those commodities are frequently subject to a percentage tax that causes an increase in the cost of the goods at the border. In order to make domestic industries more competitive, the primary objective of tariffs is to raise the prices of goods that are imported from other countries. For instance, if the price of imported steel is lower than the price of steel produced locally, a government can impose a tariff on imports to bring all prices into equilibrium. Tariffs may appear to be uncomplicated. Nevertheless, the question that needs to be answered is who will ultimately be responsible for paying for them: the government, the foreign corporation, or the average customer. Why governments use tariffs? Tariffs are utilized by governments for a variety of reasons. First, they want to safeguard domestic industry and employment opportunities. Local businesses have a better chance of competing with those of foreign enterprises if the prices of imported items are increased. The second benefit of tariffs is that they bring in cash for governments, particularly in developing nations where other tax systems may be less well developed. Last but not least, tariffs can be utilized as political instruments. During trade wars between large economies, tariff rises are frequently a part of the conflict. This is because both sides attempt to exert pressure on the other by increasing the cost of imports. On the surface, these objectives could appear to be good. Nonetheless, the influence of these aims frequently extends far beyond corporations and politicians. The immediate effect of tariffs on prices. There is a clear correlation between the imposition of tariffs and an increase in the price of items that are imported. If a government decides to impose a tariff of 25% on automobiles imported from other countries, a vehicle that was previously priced at $20,000 will now cost $25,000. Most of the time, importers end up bearing this expense themselves. They do this by passing the additional charge throughout the supply chain, which ultimately results in an increase in pricing for wholesalers, retailers, and finally purchasers. As a result, the actual burden is frequently placed on the average consumer, who is required to pay a higher price at the register. In spite of the fact that tariffs are intended to be levied against foreign manufacturers, the actual expense of these duties is borne by domestic consumers. How tariffs impact? Consumers are usually the hidden victims of tariffs. Higher import costs mean higher prices on everything from clothes to electronics to food. For example, if tariffs are applied to imported fruit, grocery store prices rise. Families have to pay more for the same product, even though their wages stay the same. This reduces overall purchasing power and can contribute to inflation. For lower-income households, which spend a larger share of their income on essentials, tariffs can feel especially painful. So while governments may argue tariffs protect jobs, the immediate trade-off is higher costs for ordinary people. How tariffs affect businesses. When it comes to tariffs, businesses are also affected, albeit in a variety of different ways. When it comes to businesses that rely on imported components or raw materials, tariffs drive up the costs of production for those businesses. A manufacturer of furniture that imports wood or metal components may witness an increase in their expenses, which may cause them to either increase their pricing or reduce their profit margins. On the other hand, domestic businesses that compete directly with imports may gain from tariffs since they reduce the competitiveness of items that are imported from other countries. It is important to note that this short-term protection frequently comes at the expense of higher prices across the entire market, which ultimately results in a decrease in demand. Tariffs in trade wars. Tariffs often become weapons in trade wars between major economies. A well-known example is the US-China trade war that began in 2018. The US imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, and China retaliated with tariffs on American products. While these moves were aimed at pressuring the other side's economy, the reality is that American farmers, manufacturers, and consumers faced higher costs. Chinese consumers also saw higher prices on American imports like soybeans. Trade wars show that tariffs rarely punish only one side. Both economies end up paying the price. Who collects tariff revenue? When a tariff is imposed, the company that is importing the goods is the one that is responsible for paying the tariff directly to the government at the border. There is a widespread misunderstanding that the tax is being paid by the foreign producer as a result of this. The importer, in reality, is the one who adds that cost to the price of the goods, and then they transmit it down the supply chain. Even though the government is the one that collects the cash from the tariffs, the money ultimately comes from the domestic customers. As a result of this, a significant number of economists say that tariffs operate more as a covert tax on consumers than they do as a penalty on producers from other countries. Tariffs and jobs. One of the main arguments for tariffs is job protection. Governments claim tariffs keep domestic industries alive by shielding them from cheaper imports. For example, steel tariffs might protect steelworkers by ensuring domestic steel stays competitive. While this can save some jobs in the short term, tariffs often create job losses in other industries. Higher steel prices may help steelworkers but hurt car manufacturers, who now pay more for raw materials and may cut jobs to reduce costs. Tariffs shift jobs rather than creating new ones, and often the overall economy loses more jobs than it saves. Tariffs and inflation tariffs have a number of unintended consequences, one of which is that they encourage inflation. If tariffs increase the cost of goods, they are passed on to customers by firms and merchants. As prices continue to climb across a variety of sectors, the overall cost of living continues to rise as well. This inflation reduces the purchasing power of consumers, which means that individuals are able to purchase fewer items with the same amount of money. After that, in order to battle inflation, central banks might decide to boost interest rates, which would make borrowing money more expensive. In this cycle, we see how a straightforward tax on imports can have repercussions throughout the entire economy, affecting not only trade, but also a great deal more. Alternatives to tariffs. Despite the fact that tariffs are one tool that governments can use, other options can accomplish the same aims without increasing the expenses for consumers. Local industries, for instance, receive direct support via subsidies, which prevents an increase in the cost of imports. Fair competition can also be created by the establishment of shared regulations between countries through the use of trade agreements. One further strategy is making investments in domestic innovation and efficiency in order to enable local industries to compete without the need for tariff protection. While tariffs are effective in achieving political gains in a short amount of time, long-term solutions typically need more intelligent measures that strike a balance between safeguarding sectors and maintaining fair prices for consumers. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this explanation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe